Hi everyone, I just had my Google Onsite interview 2 months ago. In today's video, I'm going to share with you the process and my thoughts on each step. A little background of me, I was a biology student and I started working as a machine learning engineer since the beginning of 2021, where I was responsible for some recommendation system which mostly involves the data pipeline, the data analytics, the infrastructure for the model, and a little bit of model retraining and restructuring stuff. September 2021, I accepted an offer from Amazon and started working at Amazon since November last year. I don't quite remember when I applied for this position at Google, but the recruiter reached back to me February this year. The email was odd because it said I would have an on-site interview with the team directly, and there wasn't any phone interview or previous screening steps. So I thought it's a scam or at least a not direct hire, but it turned out it is a direct hire from Google. By the time the recruiter talked to me, I had exactly 1 year of full-time working experience, so they considered me as a candidate for level 5, which means I did have system design in my on-site. In case you are not familiar with the hiring process for SDE at Google, after all your interview, your on-site, you still need to pass the hiring committee, which I saw the statistics somewhere is like 20% of people will pass the hiring committee. Then you still need to go through the team matching stage. And I have friends who passed the on-site and the hiring committee, but they couldn't find a matching team, which was really sad given all the time and efforts went into the whole process. For me, the case was a bit unique because I was interviewing with the team directly, and also, as I mentioned, I didn't have any phone interview. I went to the on-site directly. In my case, the team was ML core team, which was a team who developed the TensorFlow, but later they started serving across the organizations in Google, so they renamed or repositioned themselves into ML core team. At least that's my understanding. On the day of my interview, I had 2 algorithm interviews, one machine learning oriented, one system design, and one leadership. It lasted from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. and had 1 hour break. In my 2 algorithm round, I didn't think I would solve the problems in the beginning, but I just kept thinking loud and worked with the interviewers and ended up having satisfying solutions for both questions. I remember one of the interviewers, he was in a startup of Google, and he was excited to explain to me how the incubator, the entrepreneurship, and the startup happen inside Google. I thought that's pretty cool. And I think maybe he is the only one that's not directly from the team. For the machine learning round, I was given the option to choose a subfield inside machine learning, which are like computer vision, NLP, reinforcement learning, and some other specific case. And I went with applied machine learning. I remember the guy showed up and he asked, "Is this still a good time to talk?" I was like, "This is the interview. Can I still reschedule my interview?" Overall, he's just very considerate and respectful. I think all the questions he asked was designed by himself, because after I answered all the questions, we started chatting, and he seemed to had a backstory for each of the questions he asked. Compared to other machine learning interviews I had, I think he asked the most interesting ones, because he didn't ask a specific concept or technique or algorithm directly. Instead, he described a situation to me and asked me what I would do in that situation. And in the beginning, I was totally lost because given all the constraints he put on the situation, I don't think it's possible to have a solution because they are literally contradicting to each other. So I was just staring at him for several seconds and started repeating his question. And I kept doing that until after a while I realized it's actually possible to solve it. So I worked on the train of my thoughts and came up with a solution that I was genuinely surprised by myself. And after the interview, I looked it up. It turns out it is a technique people already used in research. So it's good and bad for my interview. It's bad in the sense that I didn't have the depth of the expertise to realize there is an existing solution to it. but it's good in the sense like I was able to come up with a solution, or at least the core idea of that solution on the spot. For the system design round, the guy also asked a very interesting question because it's not a very complicated system, but it did touch upon each component of a machine learning system. But on the other hand, I think it's not very complicated for me was because by the time of the interview, I already had work experience at Amazon Go, which is a very complicated and large-scale machine learning system. I think the only comparable large-scale project is Tesla. So I do have the intuition how the each design in the early stage can affect the later stage of the pipeline, and how the schema or lower level design can affect the long-term operational cost. Overall, it felt more like a discussion with coworker rather than interview. For the leadership round, the guy asked some very typical behavioral questions. I recognize they are typical when he asked them, but I didn't prepare very well. Overall, I think it went okay. Chatted some scenarios that happened at his work and at my previous job, but I don't think anything too special. So my whole on-site process happened on Monday. On Tuesday morning, the recruiter emailed me that he would give me an update on Friday. However, on Wednesday, the news came out that Google announced their hiring freeze. So I was like, oops. And of course, on Friday, instead of meeting me, the recruiter emailed me again to reschedule the time. However, he didn't show up. And also, because this position is not guaranteed to be fully remote, my current job at Amazon is fully remote. So after a while, I just started caring less. Overall, I was very impressed by how nice those interviewers were, especially when I couldn't come up with an answer. And also, they didn't assume I knew any technologies they developed, although they were fairly popular in machine learning community. So if I were to do this again, the only thing I would change is I would take the interview right away rather than delaying it for 3-4 months. I replied to the recruiter in April and scheduled it in July in the hope that I would have more time to brush up my lead code, my machine learning knowledge, and my project story. However, I ended up not doing any of them because with that big window, I totally forgot about the interview until the late of June. When the recruiter touched base with me again, I suddenly realized, oh, I have this interview scheduled. So I ended up not having much time preparing them anyway. So that's the biggest lesson for me. So that's my experience with Google Onsite as a machine learning engineer. If you find this video helpful, you may also be interested in another video where I shared my experience how I transited from a biology student to a machine learning engineer in 4 months. See you next time.
Sick of Saturday nights when I call you.